Right, and I think we can get started.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it's now a few minutes past 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Swedish and Central European time, and it's time to start. My name is Staffan Nyström, for those of you who don't know me. And since the 28th International Congress of Onomastic Sciences in Helsinki, Finland, this summer, I am the president of ICOS. And one of the issues the board of directors had to discuss at its very first meeting after the Congress was whether our Onomastics Online series should continue or not. And as is clear today, we have decided that it shall. And we hope to be able to present a program for the whole of 2025 sometime early next year. But more about that later, perhaps. So now I just want to welcome you very warmly to today's lecture, and I will leave the floor to our moderator, Dr. Marga Stander. Please.
There we go.
Can you see me now?
Yes, we can.
I'm so sorry, there was an internet gap.
All right, no problem. So it seems that the moderator is also struggling. So if you don't mind, I will briefly over for her. It is my great pleasure to introduce the speaker today. It's my longtime colleague from the Department of South African Sign Language and Deaf Studies at the University of the Free State in Bloemfontein, South Africa. Jani is a PhD candidate working on toponyms in sign languages, or specifically South African Sign Language, which is obviously a niche area of expertise, a very interesting one. And I think I will hand over to her to get started. Thank you, Jani.
Okay. Thank you, Kusmi. I have my speech in front of me, so now I have to replace Dr. Stander all over to Dr. Loot. As she said, my name is Jani de Lange and my sign name is this. So I just want to, first I have to begin with the slides as well. So my toponymy journey began in 2017 when I attended the International Symposium on Place Names in Namibia. So at this time, I worked at the Unit for Language Facilitation and Empowerment, who was also co-hosting the symposium. At the end of 2018, we amalgamated with the Department of South African Sign Language. The Deaf Studies was then included as a focal point, and it was also included in the name. But the history and the development of sign language and the deaf community was already part of the department's curriculum since they began with the classes in 1998. My apologies. So due to my social linguistic background, I became part of the Deaf Studies component. So my sign language skills have developed a lot since the amalgamation, and I'm really, really grateful for all my colleagues and students, both deaf and hearing, who are so patient with me in learning sign language. Sometimes I think I make up my own dialect. So I'm grateful for them and their support. So it's just important to note that I'm not deaf. I'm also not a child of deaf adults. Therefore, I do not want to talk on behalf of the deaf community, but I try to use my position and opportunities that I get to teach and raise awareness, especially amongst the hearing. I'm really honored to work with the deaf and always love every opportunity that I can learn more from them. Okay, so with amalgamation of the unit and the department, a sign language focus was included in the ISBN so that we could continue to co-host the symposium. So in 2019, sorry about that, 2 papers focusing on sign language were presented, one by Mrs. San Lombard and the other by Prof. Theo du Plessis, both of them co-presented by Emily Matabane, who is deaf. So these presentations identified a variety of gaps in sign language name studies, one being the recognition of planning sign place names. So this aspect basically became the theme of my PhD study since 2021. So last year, I had a fortunate opportunity to attend the ICOS summer school in Glasgow. So this basically gave me a bit of a chance to step away from the toponomastics and look at the whole overarching discipline of onomastics. So I'm very honored to have this opportunity to talk to you about this, and hopefully it motivates others who is either working in onomastics or sign language to consider interdisciplinary research between the two. I really think it can be a very nice and exciting, sometimes fun initiative. So the aim of this presentation is not really to focus on onomastic research, but more on focusing on sign language. I also want to take a bit more of an informal approach, since it is mid-December and we in South Africa are having a heat wave, and like Dr. Crispy said, they are having storms in Namibia, so even the internet is as unreliable as I want to say the academics, but I think that's just the assumption. Okay, so when it comes to deafness, we have generally two approaches. The one is the medical perspective, which views deafness as a disability in need of a cure. So the second view is a social cultural approach, where being deaf is an individual characteristic. Sorry about that. It's now my dog barking. So being deaf is an individual characteristics, and the use of sign language is the main marker of the deaf identity and deaf culture. So in Regan in 2010, Regan applied 8 characteristics to define a social cultural community, namely a network of voluntarily in social organizations, a shared historical knowledge and awareness, cultural artifacts, endogamous marital patterns, cultural specific humor, a shared awareness of cultural identity, a literacy and artistic tradition, and a common shared language. So each of these characteristics can be discussed within and explained and elaborated on within the deaf community and the culture. But that's another time or another day, because I will be able to keep you busy with only that for more than 40 minutes. So in general, my view is that if you start changing your focus from a way of communication, if you start changing your view from the medical perspective to a language and focus on sign language as a language equal to any other, all the other characteristics of a linguistic or social cultural community falls in place within this group. So changing your focus away from a medical condition and to the protection of a minority group and a minority language, it becomes evident that the documentation and the investigation of name signs can contribute to the language development. It contribute to the protection and the preservation of the cultural heritage within this, especially within the dominant hearing society. So, but before talking about sign names, I want to refer to sign language. South African Sign Language is one of 300 recorded national sign languages. So even though the World Federation of the Deaf uses international sign language for their conferences, there are distinct differences between different national sign languages. These differences are identifiable on lexical levels. For example, this is American Sign Language, where our sign for toilet is their sign for name. And we use this sign for rooster, where they use the sign for father. which can actually leave you in some very uncomfortable situations if you do not know the distinctions. Then we in South Africa make use of the one-hand alphabet. It is the one difference within American Sign Language, which is the T. In British Sign Language uses the two-handed alphabet. So even on a finger spelling or the alphabet platform, there's also differences between national sign languages. So due to the South Africa's history regarding missionaries and colonialism, we do have influence from the Irish and Dutch and British Sign Language. I had a deaf uncle who went to school in the oralist period, and so I learned the British Sign Language, the two-handed sign language, when I was younger, and only became aware of the one-hand finger spelling when I went to university. So American Sign Language does have a very strong international influence on a number of sign languages, mainly because it's very accessible through social platforms. Usually if you start looking for videos on sign language, you will first get videos from American Sign Language, and it's also frequently used in films nowadays. Even in the story, like Only Murderers in the Building, there is a deaf character who makes use of American Sign Language. So sign language is very known for its iconicity. I'm going to use the example of, oops, let me go back. It's house. So it looks like a house. So the use of the iconic signs contribute to the assumption that signs are just made up of gestures. And if you go to another country or you communicate with a deaf person, you will be able to communicate with them because of this. It looks like a house. So despite the linguistic differences, sign language do share common features, such as the use of space, simultaneously, iconicity, and similar social linguistic concepts. Signs are produced using 5 parameters, which is the hand shape, palm orientation. So it's the hand shape on the slide. There's a picture of different types of hand shapes, where you will either use the finger spelling alphabet, or you can have a claw hand shape, a 5-hand, an open O, flat O, those kind of things. There's different types of hand shapes. The palm orientation is the way your palm will be facing. In the example of house, both palms are facing inwards. Then location is where you will produce the sign. Is it against your head, and in terms of hello? Movement is also away from the head. And then you also have manual features. Unfortunately, usually the signing space is from your head until your waistline. But unfortunately, now you are only saying this part, so I have to sign in front of my face. It's very important to consider all these 5 parameters when you are producing a sign. We all know this sign, I love you. It's an internationally low sign. If you remove the thumb, it turns into devil. Or you can, this is a sign for green. So you can change green into fire. So when it comes to non-manual markers, it contributes to the voice, like the volume and tone, as it is in spoken languages. So making use of example, if I start including facial examples, I can ask you, is there a fire? Or I can be happy that there's a fire, or, oh goodness gracious, there's a horrible fire. So it's in the facial expression is one non-manual feature, but it can also be included in body language. I actually once meant a signer that had a very big signing space, and we presented the short course, and it really felt the whole time that she was screaming at me. For me, it was the same experience as reading an email that is written in all caps. Okay, so just want to make sure. Okay, so in spoken languages, proper names are presented by words that can be written down, but in sign language, they are represented by signs, which is visual. So sign language does not have an orthography like other languages, but it can be annotated using different annotation systems. In the slide, there's some different examples of notation systems. The most known, or the oldest one, is the ICOS system. He was the first linguist who started doing research about the language itself. Then you have a Hamburg notation system, which is based on the ICOS system. And then you have sign writing, which is more based on dance choreography. Choreography. No, anyway. I would like to explain every system to you guys, but that was also going to take a bit. I'm going to make use of the sign writing one. Considering house, the star shows it there's a connection between the two hands. The black part, the dark part of the below this, the asterisk is the hands, showing that the palms are facing inwards. So usually when the sign is the white parts indicates the inside of the palm. Then the two crosses, the arrows, shows that it's going down. So hopefully that's a very quick example to explain that. Currently, the one being most accessible for computer analysis is the Hamburg notation system, but it's also a very quite difficult one. Okay. So name signs are created by deaf individuals based on social norms and visual language structures. A person on a place will have more than one name, because now you will have the name in the hearing world and you will have a sign name. Why this becomes important is that when a place has a sign name or a person has a sign name, it indicates that this person or the place is known by the deaf community. And it's not necessarily a translation from the spoken language. The use of sign names also reinforces the bond of a shared group identity amongst the members of the deaf. And in spoken and written languages, it is logical that names are not only limited to places and people. We know that we've got onomastics. There's so many different types of names. And that made me wonder and think about if this is also the case for sign language. Okay, so what I did is I downloaded the list of key onomastic terms, and I basically classified 32 types of names according to 4 categories. So this resulted into 12 types of names for people, 15 names referring to places, 5 types of names for things, and then 1 name referring to animals. So within the discipline of sign language, I've only identified research about anthroponyms and toponyms. The SOSA and the Quadros did use Dick's taxonomy classification model and sign writing to analyze Libra toponyms. George also recently published a paper on exonyms and endonyms, focusing on Japanese Sign Language. I found this article extremely fascinating. There are some aspects that I do not agree with, but I've decided that's the responsibility of the academics, is that you must not just agree with people. But again, another topic for another day. So in sign language, researchers like Day, Sutton, Spence Spales and Lombard classified signed names as phonetic, initialized, descriptive, loans, or translations, or also combined signs. Combined signs are usually a combination between with an initialized sign and a descriptive sign. So this classification system is applied to both personal names and place names in the current research. So phonetic names are based on the sounds of spoken names through mouthing, where initialized signs have no inherent connection to the place or the person, and it often utilizes the hand shape representing the first letter from the written name. Descriptive signs refer to physical or notable qualities of a place or a person, for example, a mountain or a person's length. This is also something very specific about the deaf culture. They are very straightforward. When I went on research leave for 6 months and my deaf colleague saw me, the first thing she told me is that how fat I got. So if you are sensitive, do not work with the deaf community. They talk about what they see. They are visual in nature. So, and it's the same. And you will also see it in. One can also see it in sign names. Descriptive sign names also includes associative signs, and it is usually. Then it shows a link between the name giver and the connection with the place or the person. Okay, I already explained the combined signs, which is usually initialized signs and a descriptive sign. So Lombard claims that the phonetic names are very rarely used in sign language, in South African sign language, predominantly due to the association that the deaf community have with the oralist period in deaf education. So for the rest of the presentation, I want to provide some examples. It's not just about telling you about sign language and about the names, but to actually show you how these names look like and how fascinating it can actually become. These examples I provide are from my own experience and my own knowledge. And then I will also, where needed, I will use the classification of initialized descriptive loans or combined signs for the discussion. Okay, so firstly, personal names. I'm going to use my name as an example. I have a combined sign name. Okay, so the first thing, I sign with my left hand, my dominant left hand. So that's why this usually do not make sense to deaf people, but I've got a mole here. So it's basically pointing to the mole, which is very distinctive, and then the sign for J. So sorry, I sign left. So that's the the reason for being switched around. But that's an example of a combined sign. So making use of some famous, more prominent people, our previous president, Jacob Zuma, his sign name refers to his very visual or forehead. As a nickname at a stage, his name referred was, now I have to do this, which is a shower. I don't know how much you know about South African politics, but yeah. And then Usain Bolt, his sign name is also this, which then refers to the pose he made during after his races. Okay, so a nickname will be the one I provided as example of President Zuma. But I don't think this is something that is really evident in sign language personal names. They do have gossip names. I couldn't get a gossip name because then it is used to basically gossip about somebody. So if you have a visual name, I mean, you will see when somebody is talking about you. So I'm going to use an example. I do not know who the person is, just to explain how this gossip name can be used. So the personal name is this. And then when the deaf community wanted to gossip about the person, they did this, where the palm, the hand will basically represent the face and then refer to the name in this stage. To get a gossip name will then result basically in people getting new gossip names because it's for gossiping. There's also a lot of ethical challenges when it comes to the collection of personal names, because personal names are usually identifiable. It's usually in the area of the face. So in terms of ethical aspects, and trying to that you're not allowed to identify people, it becomes difficult. I think there are ways that one can overcome that hurdle. For example, re-recording signs and those kind of things. But the deaf communities are small, so using a specific name sign will still be identifying the person. Other examples I wanted to use, you get translated names where the name will sound like an animal's name, and then the person will use that the sign for the animal for the person's name. I don't want to give examples since it's going to identify people. Then there's another name sign which can also be alone in a way, is where it's two people who have the same name. So the second person got the same name as the first person because they have the same name, and the first person's name is already used in the community. That's why an example I can use in spoken languages is you spell Peter the same. Sorry, Prof. Jordan. Now I'm making use of you as an example. Okay, so sorry, I'm standing too still on that one. Okay. When it comes to places, initialized sign, I want to apologize. I think people who have been attending the ESPN conferences, you are going to know these examples by now. Initialized sign for a place is Johannesburg, which you only refer to the J, capital letter J. We have a descriptive sign for Cape Town, which refers to the mountain. And you will also have a combined sign for Kimberley, which is in the Northern Cape. It's a finger spelling K, and then it goes downwards to present the diamond mine in the city. But then you've got other aspects to look at in place names. For example, endonyms and exonyms. We currently have a student who is working on a study comparing place names between South Africa and Lesotho. I'm quite excited about that. So that will be one thing. Then we also have chrononyms. I used the provinces of South Africa as examples. You can use different countries as well, where South Africa, you have the south, and then the form of the country. You have Namibia, where it looks like Namibia on the map. But I use now the provinces in South Africa. So Northern Cape will be initialized sign, which will then be the N and the C. We have Mpumalanga, which is translated as the place where the sun rises, which is a direct translation from of the word Mpumalanga, which also shows that there is an overlap, or there is a link between spoken languages and sign languages. We are also including that in one of the studies that we are currently busy with. And then Limpopo is a combined sign where you have the L, and it goes like this, which refers to the Limpopo River. Street names, there haven't been a a lot of studies regarding street names. Church Street, you will have church and street. And Nelson Mandela Avenue, this is the name sign of Nelson Mandela. So you'll have Nelson Mandela Street. Just to give some examples and possibilities. Then brand names. I think brand names can be very interesting. In the case of McDonald's, it's I would say it's a combined sign, because now you've got the letter M, but you also have the visualization of the logo. Uber, I've recently learned, is this, which I also think is quite interesting, because this is also the U hand form. So that's why I argue it's combined sign, but I'm open for discussion and arguments about that. Then Spur is a steak ranch in South Africa, and the sign name refers to the feathers of the Indian. So this will be a descriptive sign. Then we've got theonyms. I recently saw a poem translated into sign language, and the sign for death is this. So I think you will also looking into those type of names can also be quite creative. In this case, I would say it is a descriptive sign. For animal names, I decided to show a video just to take a bit of a break. Okay, so hopefully, as you've seen in the video, most of the signs are descriptive. Something that I find that I started becoming quite interested in is literacy onomastics. I know within onomastics itself, it's also still the developing field. When you have if you have translations from written text, for example, Goldilocks, you will have a name sign. Now, so with Goldilocks, you have the locks and gold. But when you have authentic deaf or sign law poetry, you will not necessarily have names in that stories. There's the whole thing about sign language, literature and poetry, where it's tell it, show it, and become it. So as a sign storyteller, you become part of the story. This is also, I can also keep you busy with this quite some time. But this is something that I would really like to go into in future, is to see if there are elements of names in deaf literature, sign law. So they're the original poetry and stories signed by storytellers. Okay. So concluding, actually quite in time, it seems like, so I think that's quite good. So concluding remarks is that it's still difficult to really do a lot of research about signed place name, because there's a lack of documentation and corpus. This is not just because it's a language community you are working with, but sign language hasn't been documented for as long as spoken languages. There's no maps, there's no books. It's only since the 1960s that Stucco started doing research on sign language as a language. And it's only with the development of video cameras and cameras where it also became possible, or more possible, to document sign language. This is then also a problem in terms of endonyms and exonyms, because internationally there's not a lot of corpus for sign language. I know that based on George's article, I think they have a corpus of about 800 place names in Japanese Sign Language, but it also took them quite a while to collect them. Finland has started going through their sign language names for countries and making recommendations to use country names, endonyms of the countries. Sign language has a lot of variation, and if you start excluding variations within a specific language, it also brings up a lot of politics. The World Federation of the Deaf is also very clear and against unification and the standardization of sign languages because of this unique nature of sign language and the variation thereof. There's also a lack of collaboration between stakeholders in South Africa. I have personal experience with this, is that we have a variety of universities working on sign languages or sign language. They do not necessarily want to share their work. They do not necessarily want to share their terminology. It also becomes, now with South African Sign Language becoming a 12th official language, it even becomes more important to have stakeholders getting to work together. And I must say, from a government point of view, it feels like there's a lot of efforts from a government national level to get stakeholders to get to work together in promotion of the deaf community and the language. And then there's also ethical implications, as I referred previously, is that when it comes to the protection of the identity of your participants, it can be difficult. Means to work with that, to change that, is if you re-record videos you have collected, but that can have an impact on linguistic factors. If you do not sign the word precisely as your deaf participant has signed it, or you can make use of technology. In our department, we make use of ELAN, where you can then notate the interviews. But again, not everyone knows all the annotation systems. It depends on the purpose of the study, all those kind of things. So a lot of challenges in terms of research. And then excluding the deaf community and actually exhausting the deaf community to get resources. It is a small minority group in most, I think all the countries. Is a small minority, and if you keep on going to the deaf community, especially if now from different universities, then you can exhaust the community. And in the end, it's also giving back to the community. Do people actually do the research for the benefit of the deaf, or are they just developing dictionaries to sell it and make money from it? So there's still a lot of ethical aspects that one still has to consider without considering working with the sign language community. But I'm also from the view it is very similar, as you will find with other linguistic minorities. So I think that's basically the whole my whole story. I think the intersection of onomastics and sign language really offers very fertile ground for interdisciplinary research, and it provides unique insights with the naming practices. There are influences. We have started picking up influences between spoken languages and sign language. The influence of deaf education and the teacher training also has an influence on how sign language is being taught in schools. That has a great conventionalization impact on the signers themselves. So by expanding the scope of sign language on Onomastic to look at this wider range of name category, researchers can really start contributing to a more comprehensive understanding how the deaf communities conceptualize and use proper names, and also within their cultural context. So hopefully I gave you enough information. Please, if I've missed something, it's sometimes difficult to really know on what parts to stand still and what to just go through. So please, if there's anything you would like me to just elaborate on a bit, I think it's now time to do so.
Thank you very much, Jani. I hope I'm audible and visible this time. Okay, good. So thank you very much for a insightful and very interesting presentation, and I'm sure there's a lot of research still waiting out there, not without challenges, as you said, but nevertheless, I think you have made us aware of what is available still for us to do. So with that being said, I would like to invite the audience now for questions to ask Jani. Anyone?